Welcome back. The Doctor is in. Today I'm continuing my series discussing the Victoria War from historical Wars of the Republic era for BattleTech. This was a source book that contained 3 relatively minor wars in the grand scheme of the BattleTech Universe. The second of which is the Victoria War, which I wrote. In the previous video, I discussed how I organized the war in terms of which military commands, where they were, which worlds they attacked, which regiments were defending those worlds, and vice versa for both sides of the border in the Capellan Confederation, which is where most of the combat takes place along their border with the Federated Suns and with 2 states of the former Free Worlds League, those being the Oriente Protectorate and the Duchy of Andurian. The Capellans were aided by their allies in the magistracy of Canopus, who sent troops to both sides of the conflict to help relieve and counterattack and thus stop the invasions cold. What I'm going to do is try to go through the published product and just continue. Before I get into the actual nitty-gritty of some of the conflict itself, I'm going to go through some of the other structural portions of constructing this conflict that were required before I wrote it. So let's go ahead and get started. So, in the book, what we had after the first war in the book, there's an opening art page for the Wars of the Republic era section on the Victoria War. And that's what you see on the screen now. And then we go right back into our narrative. So here is where I give a lot of the background. These are the historical minutiae that explain why the war came to pass in the first place. So, I had to seek a reason for the war beyond just, we want to get this factory world from the Capellans that we've never had ever before. There had to be some underlying motivation for the Federated Suns to launch this invasion. So what I hit on is the discord that has existed between the rulership of the Federated Suns, that being House Davian, and the rulership of the Capellan March, the House Hossek faction within the Federated Suns. And there has been animosity between these 2 ruling houses for some time. The Davians have been the first prince family since the foundation of the Federated Suns, and the Hosseks have often coveted that prestige, that power, so they often undertake their own machinations trying to increase their personal power rather than concern themselves with issues that affect the nation as a whole. So what I hit on is that because the Capellans invaded the Federated Suns during the Jihad, and because the Hossek family has a virulent hatred for the Capellans, that the new ruler of the Hossek family, Duchess Amanda, who is now in charge of the Capellan March, undertakes a covert plan to try and avenge her family against the Capellan Confederation. And she rationalizes it as a means to add factories from the world of Victoria and thus justify the invasion by improving the military-industrial complex of the Federated Suns. But that's really secondary to the vengeance aspect. So she begins her scams by trying to ensure that she has the necessary fleet assets, and I specifically note that she omitted committing or contacting any warship commanders because they were all loyal to the First Prince, and she couldn't trust them to keep silent about her plans. That also handily allowed me to avoid worrying about orbital bombardments or any warship combat when writing the war itself. That's just another bookkeeping headache that you don't want to deal with if you can avoid it. So, I have why she chose Victoria at the bottom of this first page. And so then we move on to our second page, where it continues some of this underlying narration. And that she had a simple goal: conquer Victoria and the neighboring worlds so that it became, a more easily defensible territory to add onto the Federated Suns. The world of Menki also had factories, and it was home to the Macarian's Armored Cavalry, for whom the Hasek family and all of the Capellan March have an intense hatred, and all the worlds in between. So if you recall the map that I showed in the previous video, here I'm listing the worlds that they were going to attack in hopes of securing the conquest. And I go through some of the additional planning. Once I cover the motivations for the attackers, I cover the defenders. So I talk about the Capellans and why they were vulnerable to this attack because of their own internal issues. So we have the Capellan Chancellor. It is still Sun Tzu Liao. And I discuss how the Capellans have issues with their intelligence apparatus. They disbelieve that their neighbors are a threat, at least their traditional neighbors. They're focused on the Republic of the Sphere, which claimed a number of Capellan worlds near Terra, and they're angry about that, so they're distracted, and that distraction enables Hasek's invasion to be something of a surprise. But I make specific note that the Chancellor already also has his own secret military operations. If you've read any of the BattleTech material, you should be familiar with Sun Tzu Liao. He is a very well-known schemer. He always has plans inside of plans inside of plans. It's like playing chess with a master, where every move gives you a discovered attack from another piece, and it can be incredibly frustrating trying to deal with. So, while I have Hasek assembling a fleet and preparing her troops and recruiting only those troops who are most loyal and will keep silent, the Chancellor has been creating a transport operation that will allow him to funnel troops quickly from one end of the Confederation to another. And of course, the reason I did this is I needed to find a mechanism by which the Chancellor and the Capellans could respond quickly to this unexpected invasion and somehow overcome the attackers, especially once they get attacked on their opposite border. So, in other words, I had to invent this special transport network of jump ships in order to rationalize and explain how the invasion was stopped in the first place and how the counterattacks were able to occur as quickly as they had to prevent Hasek's forces from securing the conquest. So, now that I've covered some of those two backgrounds, we've got the combatants on the far side of the Capellan Confederation, that being the Oriente Protectorate and the Duchy of Andurian. Neither of those small states has any sort of amicable relationship with the Confederation. They are ancestral enemies. They hate one another, just as the Capellans and the Hosseks hate one another. So I have the rulers of these two small states, Duchess Evelyn Humphreys and Jessica Hallis Hughes of the Oriente Protectorate, enter an arrangement to support one another and to take advantage of the distracted Capellans. However, because they are much smaller realms and have smaller militaries upon which to rely, their goals would be even more modest than Duchess Amanda Hossek's. So here I've got some sidebars. Sidebars in BattleTech sourcebooks are used to explain smaller details of various points of the story that you're telling that don't necessarily fit within the bulk of the narration itself. So, for instance, I have that Amanda Hossek is organizing this large troop movement, and typically these are referred to as Operation Reciprocity or something. Instead of giving it a name and thus leaving a paper trail, she never named it, and therefore it's Operation Nameless. And so this list of alternate names at the end are what historians looking back on this conflict have named it for convenience, because it never actually had an operational name. And I refer to issues with, so Discontented Home talks about the Canopian troops, who are less than enthusiastic about going into another nation to fight on behalf of that nation's people, rather than staying in their own territory to defend their own worlds against potential threats. And that is most of that's the background, basically. Once I get out of that, it's necessary to discuss who the particulars are in terms of the rulers of the various nations. So that's the current section here. We've got Harrison Davian, first Prince of the Federated Sons. While he is ignorant of Amanda Hossek's schemes, he is still the ruler of the Federated Sons, and eventually he's going to become aware of what's happened, and he's going to have to take action. We'll get into that probably in the next video. Here we have Amanda Hossek herself. She hates the Davians, even though they're the rulers of the nation, or perhaps because they're the rulers of the nation, but mostly because she and her sister were essentially held hostage for most of their lives. We've got Sun Tzu Liao, Chancellor of the Capellan Confederation. There's his picture. We've got Dao Shen Liao, his son, who is the son also of the magistrates of the Magistracy of Canopus. So when Sun Tzu and Centrello married, their firstborn child is Dao Shen, heir to the Capellan Confederation, because the magistracy is traditionally ruled by a woman, so he's not necessarily heir to the Canopian throne. And here we have Naomi. She is the magistrix and the wife of Sun Tzu Liao. We've got Jessica Merrick. There's her image. Evelyn Humphreys. So we've got the other principles of the powers involved. And it's a good idea. The reason that we incorporate these sorts of pages in these books is for role-playing groups. If someone wants to set an RPG game rather than simply a BattleTech game in one of these eras, and they want to have their characters interact with any of these leaders who are involved in this conflict, that's partly why these pages get incorporated into these source books. However, that's where I'm going to leave off now. I'll get into the actual war. You saw a preview there as I flipped to the next page. We'll get into that in the next video. But for now, the Doctor is out.